Living in the countryside where there's a lot of nature, the air is clean, the food is fresh and delicious, there's a lot of interaction between people and less stressful than living in the city. More than 50% of young Japanese people who live in urban areas are interested in living in the countryside in Japan. It may be natural for young Japanese people who are exposed to a lot of stress every day when they live in the countryside in Japan. It's summer vacation now, so I came back to my hometown, which is very countryside. Of course, I grew up here, so I feel really comfortable. When it comes to foreigners living in the countryside, I don't recommend you guys living in the countryside in Japan for your first time in Japan. So if you are interested in living in the countryside in Japan, this video is definitely for you. So in this video, I will introduce why I don't recommend you guys living countryside in Japan for the first time. So the first one is unique local Japanese culture. A unique culture remains very strong in the countryside in Japan, and some of them are difficult to understand if you are not originally from there. The culture differs from region to region. Even for me as a Japanese, if I move to another region, I will face new Japanese culture which I probably don't understand. This time I would like to introduce two unique cultures in my hometown as examples. The first one is community chess. It may not be only in my hometown, but I think community chess is probably famous in the countryside in Japan. When you hear about donation, it's basically you have a choice whether you donate or not. But in my hometown, of course you have a choice, but you basically cannot refuse to donate. So it's kind of mandatory. 5 to 6 times every year, local leader goes around the houses to collect donation for events such as firework festival, compensation for the natural disasters, and also for distribution to the people who need help. The reason why I said it's kind of mandatory, in my hometown it's very small community, so most people know each other, so it's basically difficult to refuse it. That's why I said it's kind of mandatory. I asked my mother how much we paid last year for that kind of community chest, and she said we paid around 5,000 yen. Yeah, of course the amount is not that important, and the donation is very usual in my hometown, so there's nothing wrong or even weird for us. But if we move to a new place or countryside in Japan, then people ask you to donate, probably you feel weird. It's unlikely in the big cities like Tokyo. In fact, I have lived in Tokyo more than 5 years, but I've never ever experienced that kind of thing. Well, another thing in my hometown, the local culture, is hyaku. Well, hyaku is famous being confusing to immigrants, and the word of hyaku is only used in my region or region around here. So people, for instance, in Osaka, Kyoto, Tokyo, they don't know the meaning of the hyaku or even never heard about that term. Hyaku is a job which one person from each household needs to participate for several times in a year. It may be more than several times, it depends on the year, to mow or to put weeds or to clean public places, doing these kind of work together. Well, it's same as community chess, no one forces you to participate, but it's actually difficult to refuse it. Living in a small community together, so help each other and then live together, it's very usual in the countryside in Japan. Well, for me, of course, I grew up here, so it's a usual thing for me already. But if you are new here and then someone told you there is a hyaku, you need to participate for work, you probably feel confusing. The first reason why I don't recommend you guys living in the countryside in Japan is there are still unique Japanese culture remains in the countryside in Japan, and then some of them are probably difficult for you to understand. If you are living in a big city like Tokyo, you will never ever worry about transportation. For example, Yamanote Line in Tokyo, they run every 3 minutes. On the other hand, in my hometown, our local train run only once an hour. So trains in the city will never ever wait for you even though you are about to miss the train. But in my hometown, if we are about to miss the train and then run desperately on the station platform, the train is basically waiting for us. Because if we miss one train, we need to wait 1 hour. If train is inconvenient, we should use a bus. Yes, you're right. So we have buses, but only 3 times in a day. So what do we need? Well, we need a car. Well, more precisely, we need cars in my hometown. Well, it is very common for each household to have at least 2 cars and 1 light truck. So total 3 cars in one household. Well, of course, if you are living alone, you don't need to have several cars. But living in Japan for the first time, and then like shortly after moving to countryside in Japan, you need to buy a car, you need to do a lot of procedures, and of course you need to get international driving license. It's not easy to buy a car shortly after you move to a countryside in Japan. So the second reason is the transportation is really very inconvenient in the countryside in Japan. So you need a car, but it's sometimes not easy to have a car for you for the first time in Japan. That's why I don't recommend you guys to live in the countryside in Japan for the first time. Well, in the countryside, most people know each other and people's name. When we see a person who has just moved to countryside but never ever seen before, we just start talking about who are they. Especially for you guys who don't look like Japanese, rumors spread so quickly in the countryside in Japan. So shortly after you move to countryside in Japan, you will be more famous than any other celebrities. Well, of course, being famous is not a bad thing for you. People in the countryside are not used to seeing foreigners, therefore they tend to stare at you. So you may feel uneasy. So yeah, of course everyone wants to settle down after they move to another place. You need a certain amount of time to adjust to new community or something. Until then, you probably feel uneasy. That's the third reason why I don't recommend you guys living in the countryside in Japan. While living in a different world is fresh, but also stressful. At times like this, people go shopping and having a dinner to relieve stress. However, if you go to countryside in Japan, there are no entertainment facilities there. For example, in my hometown, we don't have a karaoke. We have actually 1 or 2 places where we can have a dinner, but we need to book 1 week before. We have a supermarket, of course, but we don't have shops or stores where we can buy clothes or something like that. Well, if you are like people who like shopping to relieve stress, or you're going to dinner to relieve stress, life in the countryside is really difficult for you. There are like really no entertainment facilities to relieve stress. So what I can say is be in nature is the only way to relieve stress maybe. We have a lot of nature. But anyway, if you expect life in Tokyo, like many entertainment facilities, the living in the countryside is really tough for you. So the fourth reason is the countryside, there are not many entertainment facilities. Sometimes it's difficult to relieve stress for you. So that's why I don't recommend you guys living in the countryside in Japan. Okay, so this is the last thing, probably the biggest one, and you have already an idea in your head, which is Japanese language. I'm sure you all know that Japanese people are not good at speaking English. So like especially in rural areas, there's really no one who can speak English. For example, in my hometown, I can speak English a bit. I've never ever met people who can speak English beside me in my hometown. If you're living in the countryside in Japan, I think you have many problems, you have many troubles. People can't speak English, so you need a lot of effort to solve the problem. Living in the countryside, as I told you, there are so many things you may not understand. And then you probably need explanation, but they don't speak English, they explain in Japanese. That would be extremely difficult, I think. You mostly don't understand what people talk and what people write. That is really tough. I've actually experienced that kind of thing. I lived in another country. I didn't speak their language. It's not like English speaking country. They all like speak their language, but I'm the only one who didn't speak that language. I was something like feel isolated. Of course they are not meant to be, but I felt like that. Yeah, anyway, like, you know, only you don't understand the language is like really tough and then like hard time for you. Thinking about you don't speak Japanese language, living in the countryside in Japan for the first time for you is like way harder than you expected. So that's the last reason and the biggest reason I don't recommend you guys living in the countryside for the first time in Japan. Living in another country is not always easy, but if it's in the countryside, your experience in Japan would be more difficult. In this video, I shared my opinion to living in the countryside in Japan. But of course, there are so many good things living in the countryside in Japan. Moreover, if you are familiar with Japanese culture or you can speak Japanese language, some problems that I introduced today, problems you will face in the future, are not problems anymore. If you want to know Japanese information and culture more, these videos are good for you. Please watch them after this video. And thank you so much for watching this video. Before you read, if this video helps you, please give me a good button and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching again. See ya.